I was halfway through pouring sweet tea into Kayla's glass when she said it loud, sharp and smiling like she hadn't just cut me in two. Well, since Diana clearly won't be needing it anymore, I'll be wearing the diamond necklace for the gala next month. Might as well keep it in the family, right? There was a pause, just a flicker, as the rest of the family froze around our Sunday dinner table. My son Tyler blinked at his wife but said nothing. My granddaughter Lila stared into her mashed potatoes. Kayla's mother chuckled nervously. And me? I just smiled, a small, closed-lipped, calm smile. Because while they passed dishes and ignored my silence, they didn't know the attorney's assistant was parked 2 blocks away, holding a notarized letter in a cream-colored envelope. A letter that would undo every single assumption Kayla had ever made about who she was entitled to become. They thought I was old and tired, a fading shadow of the woman I used to be. But they were wrong. My name is Diana Brooks, and at 68 years old, I've learned that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the calm before justice arrives. When I was younger, I believed sacrifice was love's purest form. I believed that giving until it hurt meant giving correctly. When my husband Michael died of pancreatic cancer 12 years ago, I sold our home and my jewelry boutique downtown, the business I'd built with my own hands over 30 years to help Tyler and his new wife Kayla buy their dream house. A sprawling 4-bedroom colonial in Spokane's most prestigious neighborhood. "Mom, you shouldn't have," Tyler had said, his eyes glistening when I handed him the check. "It's what family does," I'd answered. Kayla had hugged me then. A perfect camera-ready hug that never quite reached her eyes. I moved into their guest house, a charming little cottage at the back of their property. In the beginning, I thought we'd created something beautiful. I took care of my grandchildren, Lila and Caleb, while Tyler built his career as a corporate attorney, and Kayla established herself in Spokane's social circles. I cooked family dinners, volunteered at school functions, and handled the everyday magic that keeps a household running smoothly. The diamond necklace stayed locked in my jewelry box, worn only on special occasions. It had belonged to my grandmother, who'd received it from her mother. 4 generations of women, passing down not just diamonds but dignity. I'd planned to give it to Lila on her 18th birthday, 8 years from now. But as months became years, something shifted. Small comments at first. "That recipe's a bit outdated, Di," Kayla would say, replacing my homemade pasta sauce with something from an organic market. "Don't worry about the school run today. The nanny can handle it," she'd announce, though I'd been doing it happily for years. Tyler noticed nothing. Or perhaps he chose not to. Each time I caught his eye after one of Kayla's remarks, he'd glance away, suddenly fascinated by his phone or the newspaper. Then came the redecorating. Without warning, Kayla replaced every piece of furniture I'd helped them choose when they first moved in. My suggestions for the garden were overruled. Family photos where I appeared prominently were relocated to hallways, then closets, then boxes. The guest house would make a perfect yoga studio, Kayla mentioned one evening, as casually as discussing the weather. We should think about converting it. "Where would Mom live?" Tyler had asked, finally finding his voice. Kayla's answer came with a practiced smile. "There's that lovely senior community near the lake." I pretended not to hear, focusing instead on helping Lila with her science project. But that night, alone in my cottage, I opened my jewelry box and held the diamond necklace in my palm. The center stone caught the light, sending prisms dancing across my bedroom wall. For the first time, I wondered if I'd been wrong about sacrifice, if giving everything had somehow made me worth nothing in their eyes. The next morning, I called Harold Klein, my late husband's attorney and friend. We met for coffee downtown, in the shadow of what used to be my jewelry boutique. "They can't actually force you out, Diana," Harold said after I explained my situation. "Your name is still on the deed. You funded half the purchase." I never told Tyler that, I admitted. I let him believe it was a gift. Harold's eyes softened behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Why?" "Because I wanted him to feel successful, independent." I stirred my untouched coffee. I didn't want him to feel indebted. And now I'm wondering if I made a mistake. That conversation was the first step on a path I never expected to walk. Not at my age. Not after a lifetime of putting others first. The breaking point came last month at Kayla's birthday dinner. She'd invited 20 guests, none of whom were my friends. I spent the evening in the kitchen, plating appetizers I hadn't chosen and mixing drinks I wasn't offered. When it was time for gifts, Kayla opened mine last, a vintage brooch I'd found at an estate sale, and restored myself. Knowing her fondness for Art Deco pieces, how quaint, she'd said, barely glancing at it before setting it aside. Later that night, as guests were leaving, I overheard her in the foyer. Tyler's mom is sweet, but honestly, she's just lingering. These older people don't know when it's time to move on. The woman she was speaking to, a blonde in an expensive dress, nodded sympathetically. My mother-in-law was the same way. Eventually, we had to be firm. I slipped away before they could see me, but something crystallized in that moment. A lifetime of bending doesn't make you flexible. Eventually, it breaks you. The next day, I returned to Harold's office with clear eyes and a steady voice. I need to protect what's mine, I said. And that's exactly what we did. Quietly, methodically. Without anger, but with absolute resolve. Which brings me back to that Sunday dinner, to Kayla's announcement about my diamond necklace, and to the small, knowing smile that no one at the table understood. Mom, are you okay with that? Tyler finally asked, minutes too late. I set down the pitcher of sweet tea and dabbed my lips with a napkin. You know, I think I'll step outside for some fresh air. As I walked toward the French doors leading to the garden, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing. I'll get it, I said softly. And there she was, Marina Klein, Harold's assistant, holding a cream-colored envelope. Mrs. Diana Brooks? She asked formally, though we'd met several times during the past month. Yes, dear. Thank you for coming. Behind me, I felt Kayla approach, curiosity emanating from her like expensive perfume. What's this about? She asked, voice sharp with suspicion. Marina smiled professionally. Just delivering some important documents for Mrs. Brooks. She handed me the envelope, then added, and I'll need to witness the receipt, as instructed. As I turned back toward the dining room, envelope in hand, I saw confusion ripple across Kayla's perfect features. For the first time in years, I felt something long forgotten. Power. Not the harsh, demanding power Kayla wielded like a weapon. Something quieter. Something stronger. The power of truth, finally coming to light. The cream-colored envelope felt substantial in my hands as I walked back to the dining table. Conversations halted. Forks paused midair. Even young Caleb, usually oblivious to adult tension, stopped swinging his legs under the table. What's that, Grandma? Lila asked, her 10-year-old eyes curious but wary. Children always sense the undercurrents adults pretend don't exist. Just some papers I've been expecting, I answered gently, setting the envelope beside my plate. I didn't open it immediately. Some moments deserved to be savored. Marina remained standing by the doorway, clipboard in hand. Professional, observant, a witness in every sense of the word. Who's she? Kayla's mother, Patricia, asked with poorly disguised disapproval. She'd never approved of me living in the guest house, though she herself had accepted countless loans from Tyler and Kayla over the years. This is Marina Klein, I explained. She works with Harold Klein, Michael's old attorney. Tyler's head snapped up at the mention of his father's lawyer. Is everything okay, Mom? There was genuine concern in his voice, which made what was coming both easier and harder. My son wasn't a bad man, just a weak one. A man who'd allowed his moral compass to be gradually recalibrated by his wife's ambitions. Everything is about to be, I replied. Kayla let out an exaggerated sigh. Can this wait until after dinner? We were discussing the children's hospital gala. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to me. And my accessories for it, I smiled. Yes, you mentioned you'd be wearing my diamond necklace. Our diamond necklace, she corrected, emphasizing the our with practiced precision. Family heirlooms become communal property, Diana. I'm sure you understand. Behind her practiced smile, I could see the calculation. She'd been eyeing that necklace for years. It wasn't just about the diamonds, impressive as they were. It was about what they represented. History, legitimacy, something her money couldn't buy outright. Actually, I said, finally breaking the seal on the envelope, there are some details about family property I think we should clarify. I removed several documents, neatly organized with colored tabs. Harold was always thorough. The first document, I explained, voice steady, is the deed to this house. I slid it across the table toward Tyler. You'll notice my name is still listed as co-owner. I never transferred my half to you despite what you might have assumed. Tyler's face paled as he scanned the document. Mom, I don't understand. I said I'd help you buy your dream home, I interrupted gently. And I did. But I never said I was giving up my investment in it, Kayla laughed, a brittle sound like icicles breaking. This is ridiculous. That was 12 years ago. You can't possibly— The second document, I continued, removing another paper, confirms my legal residence in the guest house. Not as a favor, but as my right as co-owner of the property. Patricia made a choking sound. Tyler, are you going to let her do this? But Tyler was still staring at the deed, his lawyer's mind no doubt racing through implications. And finally, I said, saving the most important for last. This document confirms that the diamond pendant, the one you were planning to wear to the gala, Kayla, has been placed in a trust for Lila. She'll receive it on her 18th birthday. Lila's eyes widened. Really, Grandma? Really, sweetheart. It's been in our family for 4 generations of women. You'll be the 5th. Kayla's face contorted through several emotions before settling on cold fury. You had no right to make these decisions without consulting us. We're family. We take care of you. The last words hung in the air, their hollowness echoing. Take care of me? When had they ever— I'm not done, I said, my voice soft but unwavering. There's a letter as well. I'd like to read it aloud if you don't mind. No one objected. They couldn't seem to find their voices. I unfolded the letter, my own words, written weeks ago but feeling more true with each passing day. To my family, I began. For 12 years, I've dedicated myself to supporting this household. I've cared for the children, maintained the home, and stepped aside when my input wasn't welcome. I did this out of love, believing that sacrifice was love's highest form. I was wrong. Love without respect isn't love at all, it's servitude. And I've come to understand that by allowing myself to be diminished in your eyes, I've taught you nothing about the woman I truly am. I paused, looking directly at Tyler, whose eyes had filled with tears. I'm not angry. I'm awake. From this day forward, I'll be living differently. I'll remain in the guest house, as is my legal right, but my role in this household has changed. I won't be available for childcare without advance notice and agreement. I won't prepare meals I'm not invited to share. I won't be invisible at my own table. Kayla stood abruptly. This is emotional manipulation. You're punishing us because I wanted to borrow a necklace. It wasn't just the necklace, Kayla, I said quietly. It was hearing you call me useless to your friends last month. It was watching my son say nothing when you suggested moving me to a senior home. It was realizing that I've become a convenience, not a person in this family. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler looked stricken, glancing between his wife and me like a man witnessing a car crash in slow motion. You heard that? He finally managed. I heard everything, I confirmed. And more importantly, I felt everything. Every slight. Every dismissal. Every time my contribution was taken for granted. Marina cleared her throat softly from the doorway. Mrs. Brooks, if you could sign here to confirm delivery of the documents. I walked over and signed her clipboard. Our eyes met briefly professional, but with a glint of something like admiration. Thank you, Marina. Please give Harold my regards. As she left, I turned back to the table. Caleb had started crying quietly, sensing the tension. Lila was watching me with new eyes, perhaps seeing for the first time not just a grandmother, but a woman with boundaries. What happens now? Tyler asked, his voice small. I gathered the documents and returned them to the envelope. Now we begin again. On new terms? And the gala? Kayla demanded, still fixated on appearances. I smiled genuinely this time. I'm sure you'll find something suitable to wear, Kayla. You always do. As I walked toward the door, Patricia called after me. Where are you going? We haven't finished dinner. I paused, hand on the doorframe. I've said what needed saying. I think we could all use some time to digest more than just the meal. Outside, the evening air felt different somehow. Cleaner. I walked slowly to my guest house, the weight of 12 years of silence finally lifting from my shoulders. Behind me, I could hear raised voices, Kayla's sharp accusations, Tyler's defensive responses. Their problems were their own now. I had reclaimed something precious today. Not just property or jewelry, my dignity. And as I unlocked the door to my small cottage, I realized that sometimes the strongest power isn't in taking action, it's in taking back yourself. The morning after my announcement, I woke to an unusual sound silence. No grandchildren bursting through my door asking for pancakes. No Kayla calling to remind me about school lunches or Tyler's shirts that needed ironing. Just the gentle tick of my grandmother's mantel clock and sunlight streaming through curtains I'd chosen myself. For the first time in years, I savored my morning coffee on my own porch, watching hummingbirds dart between the fuchsias I'd planted last spring. The world hadn't ended. The sky hadn't fallen. I'd simply drawn a line, and already the air felt clearer for it. My phone buzzed twice with text messages from Tyler. "Mom, we need to talk. Can I stop by before work?" And then, 5 minutes later, "Please," I typed back. "I'll put on a fresh pot of coffee." When Tyler arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept. His usually immaculate suit was slightly rumpled, his eyes ringed with shadows. He stood awkwardly at my door as if suddenly unsure whether he was welcome in a space he'd always taken for granted. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Coffee's ready." He sat at my small kitchen table, hands wrapped around the mug I placed before him. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared into the dark liquid as if it might offer answers. "Kayla and I fought all night," he finally said. I nodded, but didn't respond. Some silences need to be filled by the people who created them. She said I betrayed her by not defending her. He looked up, his father's eyes staring out from his troubled face. "But I think I've been betraying you for years." "Tyler." "No, Mom, please. Let me say this." He took a deep breath. "I knew how she treated you. I saw it happening in small ways, then bigger ones. I told myself it was just Kayla's way, that she needed to feel in control of her home, that you were resilient enough to handle it." I sipped my coffee, letting him continue. "But last night, when you read that letter," his voice cracked slightly, "I realized I've been lying to myself. I've been a coward." Outside, a lawnmower started up somewhere down the street, life continuing its ordinary rhythm while my son and I sat at a crossroads. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked finally. I set my cup down carefully. "Would you have listened? Really listened?" His silence was answer enough. "I didn't want to make you choose, Tyler, between your wife and your mother. That's an impossible position." "But you're making me choose now," he said, a hint of his old defensiveness returning. I shook my head. "No, I'm choosing myself now. There's a difference." He stared at me. This son I'd raised alone after Michael died. This man who'd somehow forgotten the strength it took for a widow to rebuild a life, to run a business, to raise a child without faltering. "The house," he said finally. "Were you ever going to tell me you still owned half of it?" "I honestly don't know," I admitted. "It seems simpler to let you believe it was all yours. I wanted you to feel successful, established. I never thought it would matter. Until Kayla suggested sending you to Pinewood Acres." I winced at the name of the senior community, a place I'd visited friends in, with its beige walls and scheduled activities. A place that felt like waiting, not living. That was part of it, I acknowledged. "But Tyler, this isn't about punishment. It's about correction." Our relationship became unbalanced, and I let it happen. "That's on me as much as anyone." He rubbed his face with both hands. "What does this mean practically? Are you moving out?" "No. The guest house is my home, and legally I have every right to stay." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "But I won't be the unpaid housekeeper and nanny anymore. I love Lila and Caleb more than words can say, but I need my own life too." "And the necklace?" Kayla's furious about that. I felt a flash of irritation. "The necklace was never hers to claim, Tyler. It's been passed from mother to daughter for 4 generations. Lila is the rightful inheritor." "But Kayla says—" "I don't care what Kayla says," I interrupted, surprising us both with my firmness. "Some things aren't negotiable." Tyler stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. The mother he knew, the one who bent and accommodated and smoothed over troubles, had been replaced by someone with edges and boundaries. "I have to get to work," he said finally, standing. "There's a partners meeting I can't miss." Always an escape route, I thought sadly. Always somewhere else to be when emotions became too real. "We'll talk more later," I said, walking him to the door. He paused on the threshold. "For what it's worth, Mom." "I'm sorry." "I know you are, honey." After he left, I sat back down with my cooling coffee and realized something startling. For the first time in 12 years, I had a day with no obligations to anyone but myself. No school pickups. No dinner to prepare. No laundry that wasn't my own. The feeling was terrifying. And exhilarating. I picked up my phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in years. "Eleanor? It's Diana Brooks." "Yes, it's been too long." "Listen, are you still volunteering at the art museum downtown? I was wondering if they might need another docent." By noon, I had an interview scheduled. By 2, I'd pulled my old jewelry-making tools from storage and set them up on my kitchen table. And by 4, when Lila normally would have burst through my door asking for help with homework, I was sketching designs for a silver pendant, something I hadn't done since closing my boutique. The knock, when it came, was tentative. Not Lila's usual exuberant pounding. I opened the door to find both my grandchildren standing there, looking uncertain. "Mom said we have to ask permission now," Lila explained, her expression serious. "Before we come over," my heart squeezed. "You're always welcome here," I said, opening the door wider. "That will never change." They entered cautiously, taking in the unusual sight of my jewelry tools spread across the table. "What's all this, Grandma?" Caleb asked, pointing at a pair of tiny pliers. "This is what I used to do before you were born," I explained, pulling out a chair for each of them. "I made jewelry. Beautiful things that people treasured. Like the diamond necklace?" Lila asked. "Well, I didn't make that one. That came from my grandmother. But yes, like that." "Mom's really mad about the necklace," Lila said matter-of-factly. "She was yelling about it this morning," I sighed. Sometimes adults get too attached to things when what really matters is people. "Is that why you're not coming to dinner anymore?" Caleb's 7-year-old face crumpled slightly. "Because Mom cares more about things than people?" "Out of the mouths of babes. It's more complicated than that," I hedged. "But I'll make you a promise. You two can come here anytime you want. We can have our own dinners sometimes. And I'll still come to every school play and soccer game." "But it won't be the same," Lila said, with the devastating clarity of children. "No," I agreed, gently touching her cheek. "It won't be the same. Sometimes things have to change so they can get better." "Better how?" she pressed. I considered my answer carefully. "Better because now when we're together, I'll be really here. Not just going through motions or feeling invisible. I always saw you." "Grandma," Caleb said, leaning against me, and just like that, tears I'd been holding back for years threatened to spill over. "I know you did, sweetheart," I managed. "That's why you're my favorite people in the whole world." The Children's Hospital Gala arrived on a perfect May evening, 2 weeks after my confrontation at the dinner table. Though I'd received an invitation months ago addressed to the Monroe family, I had no intention of attending. Not because I didn't support the cause, but because these events had long since become Kayla's stage, with Tyler and me relegated to supporting roles. So I was surprised when Marina Klein called that afternoon. "Mrs. Brooks? Harold was wondering if you'd reconsider attending the gala tonight." I frowned at the phone. "Harold's going to a charity gala?" Marina laughed. "He's on the hospital board. Has been for years. He mentioned you two used to attend these functions together, back when your husband was alive." A memory surfaced. Harold and Michael in matching tuxedos, Harold's wife Elaine and me comparing notes on the silent auction items. Those were different days when my opinion mattered and my company was valued. "I don't think it would be appropriate," I said carefully. "My daughter-in-law is on the decorating committee. It might create tension." Actually, Marina's voice took on a conspiratorial tone. "Harold specifically mentioned that Mrs. Tyler Monroe has been telling everyone about a vintage diamond pendant she'll be wearing. He thought you might want to clarify the situation." I sat up straighter. "She's still planning to wear it? Even after everything?" "Apparently so. Harold received a rather forceful call from your son yesterday, asking if the trust arrangement could be temporarily suspended for family harmony." A hot flush of anger rose in my chest. "And what did Harold say?" "That trusts are legally binding instruments, not suggestions." Marina paused. "He also said some things about your son's backbone that I probably shouldn't repeat." Despite everything, I laughed. Harold had known Michael since college. He'd watched Tyler grow up. His disappointment would sting more than any legal rebuke. "So," Marina continued, "will you be coming? Harold's arranged a table. Several of your old friends from the Downtown Business Association will be there." Old friends. People who knew me as Diana Brooks, jeweler and businesswoman. Not just as Tyler's mom or the grandmother who lives in the guest house. "I'd need something to wear." I hedged. "The black dress with the scoop neck that you wore to Michael's retirement party would be perfect." Marina said promptly, then added, "Harold mentioned it once. Said you outshone everyone that night." I felt a blush creep up my neck. Harold Klein had noticed my dress? The thought was both unsettling and oddly flattering. "I'll think about it," I promised. After hanging up, I went to my bedroom closet and pushed aside everyday clothes until I found the garment bag at the back. Inside was the black dress, simple but elegant, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that swirled just below the knee. I'd almost forgotten how it felt to dress for an occasion, to be seen. Before I could talk myself out of it, I called Marina back. "Tell Harold I accept." The Spokane Grand Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and spring flower arrangements when I arrived. Harold was waiting in the lobby, distinguished in his tuxedo, silver hair gleaming under the lights. "Diana," he said warmly, taking both my hands in his. "You look wonderful." "I feel like an imposter," I admitted, suddenly nervous. "It's been years since I've done anything like this." "Nonsense. You used to light up these dreary functions." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" As we entered the ballroom, I spotted them immediately. Kayla in a form-fitting red gown, Tyler looking handsome but uncomfortable in his tuxedo, standing near the main table with the event organizers. Kayla's neck was conspicuously adorned with a modern diamond choker, showy and expensive, but lacking the history and grace of my grandmother's pendant. "She didn't wear it," I whispered to Harold. Relief washing over me. "Of course not," he replied. "She couldn't. It's in a safety deposit box that requires both your signature and the trust executor's to access." I looked at him sharply. "You didn't tell me that part," he shrugged, eyes twinkling. "You didn't ask for details." Before I could respond, a woman's voice called my name. "Diana? Diana Brooks, is that really you?" I turned to see Eleanor Thompson, my old friend from the Downtown Business Association, approaching with a glass of champagne in hand. "Eleanor, it's so good to see you. Where have you been hiding? The last I heard, you'd closed the boutique and vanished from downtown entirely." Harold smoothly excused himself to get drinks, leaving Eleanor and me to catch up. As we chatted, more familiar faces appeared, former colleagues, clients from my jewelry days, people who knew me as me, not as an extension of Tyler's family. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event chairwoman announced from the stage, "please take your seats. Dinner will be served shortly, followed by our auction." Harold guided me to our table, where 6 others were already seated, all friends from my previous life. They greeted me with genuine warmth, asking about my designs, reminiscing about downtown in its heyday. From across the room, I felt Kayla's eyes on me. She was whispering something to Tyler, whose gaze found mine with a mixture of surprise and something else, embarrassment, perhaps. Or shame. "Your son and daughter-in-law seem quite popular," observed James Chen, who'd owned the accountancy firm next to my boutique. "She's on every committee in town, from what I hear," I smiled diplomatically. "Kayla's very involved in the community?" James replied, not quite convinced. "I remember when you were the one everyone wanted on their board. Best fundraiser in 3 counties, and you actually cared about the causes." The conversation flowed easily through dinner, decades-old connections reestablishing themselves without effort. I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time in months, sharing stories and plans. "Diana's considering reopening her studio," Harold announced as dessert arrived. "Perhaps not a full boutique, but a workshop for custom pieces and restorations." I blinked at him. "I am, aren't you?" he challenged, eyebrows raised. "Those tools didn't appear on your table by accident." The others immediately chimed in with encouragement and suggestions: locations, suppliers, potential clients. By the time coffee was served, a pipe dream had begun to take solid form. "Ladies and gentlemen," the chairwoman returned to the microphone. "Before we begin our auction, I'd like to recognize some special guests who've made tonight possible." She proceeded to thank various committee members and donors, including Kayla, who stood and waved graciously as her name was called. I applauded politely, along with everyone else. "And finally," the chairwoman continued, "I'd like to acknowledge someone whose return to our community is long overdue. Many of you will remember Diana Brooks, whose downtown jewelry boutique was a Spokane institution for over 30 years. A spotlight suddenly found me, and applause erupted around the room. I froze, stunned by the unexpected recognition. Diana not only created beautiful pieces that many of us still treasure, the chairwoman went on, but she was instrumental in establishing the Downtown Arts District and the first children's hospital jewelry auction, which has since raised over $2 million for pediatric care." The applause grew louder. Harold gently nudged me to stand, which I did on shaky legs. "Diana, we've missed your artistry and your heart. Welcome back." As I nodded my thanks, my eyes met Kayla's across the room. Her perfect smile had slipped, replaced by an expression of confusion and dawning realization. She was seeing me, truly seeing me perhaps for the first time, not as an aging relative to be managed, but as a woman with a history and identity completely separate from her household. "Did you know about this?" I whispered to Harold as I sat back down. "I may have mentioned to Catherine that you were attending," he admitted, looking not the least bit repentant. The rest was all her. The auction began, but I hardly noticed the items being presented. My mind was spinning with possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider in years. A small studio. Regular hours? Creating beauty again. As the evening wound down, I found myself in the ladies' room, refreshing my lipstick, when Kayla entered. We stood side by side at the mirrors, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "I didn't know you were coming tonight," she finally said, her voice carefully neutral. It was a last-minute decision. She adjusted her diamond choker, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from her before. "That chairwoman seemed to know you quite well. Catherine and I served on several boards together, years ago." I capped my lipstick. "Before I sold the boutique to help you and Tyler buy the house." The words hung in the air, not accusatory, but factual. Kayla's reflection stared at mine, calculation and something like uncertainty flickering in her eyes. For once, Kayla Monroe had nothing to say. June bloomed across Spokane with unusual warmth, mirroring the gradual thaw in my frozen life. The small desk in my guest house became cluttered with sketches and supply catalogs. My fingers, stiff at first from years of disuse, gradually remembered their old dexterity with pliers and wire. I'd started small, a few simple silver pendants, a pair of earrings for Eleanor, a charm bracelet for Lila's upcoming birthday. Each completed piece felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Long surrendered to the role of convenient grandmother, the children still visited daily, though now they knocked first, a small courtesy that somehow meant everything. Lila especially had taken an interest in my work, sitting quietly beside me as I shaped metal and set stones. "Did you make jewelry when my dad was little?" she asked one afternoon, watching me polish a silver bangle. "I did." "I opened my boutique when your father was just a bit younger than you. Was it hard? Being a mom and running a business?" I set down my polishing cloth. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And the most rewarding," she nodded thoughtfully. "Mom says women can't really have it all, that you have to choose between family and career." Of course Kayla would say that. She'd chosen social status over professional accomplishment, then resented anyone who reminded her of that choice. "I think," I said carefully, "that life isn't about having it all at once. It's about seasons. There were years when your father needed more of me, so the business took second place. And times when the business needed more attention, so I found help with your father. Like a nanny? Sometimes. Or friends, or your grandfather." I smiled at the memory of Michael, so proud to be the dad who chaperoned field trips and coached soccer while his wife built her business. Balance isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you create fresh each day. Lila considered this, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "Mom's been acting weird since the gala." "Weird how?" "Quiet. She keeps looking at old photo albums. And yesterday she asked Dad about your jewelry store. Whether he remembered it. This surprised me." Kayla had maintained a chilly distance since our encounter in the ladies' room, communicating with me only through Tyler or the children when absolutely necessary. People are complicated. Lila. Even adults don't always understand why they feel the way they do. The conversation shifted to Lila's upcoming science fair, but her words stayed with me long after she'd gone home for dinner, a meal I was no longer expected to prepare or attend. That evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Brooks?" "This is Margaret Whitman from Spokane Arts Quarterly." The woman's voice was brisk, professional. "Catherine Chen suggested I call you. Catherine, the gala chairwoman. What can I do for you, Ms. Whitman?" "We're doing a feature on Spokane's artisan revival, local craftspeople returning to traditional methods in jewelry, woodworking, textiles. Catherine mentioned you're reopening your studio." "It's very small scale," I demurred. "Just a hobby, really." "From what I hear, your hobby once created pieces that still fetch premium prices at estate sales." Her tone warmed. "We'd love to include you in the feature. Perhaps a photo of you at work, a brief interview about your return to the craft." My first instinct was to decline. To make myself smaller, less visible. the habit of a dozen years. Then I thought of Lila watching me work. Of the women at the gala who'd approached me with stories of engagement rings and anniversary gifts I'd created for them years ago. Of my gradual reemergence into a world I'd voluntarily left. Yes, I heard myself say. I'd be happy to participate. 2 days later, the photographer and reporter arrived at my guest house. I'd cleaned up my small workspace, but not too much. The organized chaos of a working studio seemed important to preserve. I wore my favorite blue blouse and simple silver jewelry of my own making. "This is charming," Margaret said, glancing around the cottage. "But surely you need more space if you're returning to production." "I'm exploring options," I admitted. "There's a small storefront available in the arts district. Nothing like my old boutique, but enough for a workshop and display area." The interview flowed easily as I demonstrated techniques and showed pieces in progress. We discussed changes in the industry, the renewed interest in artisan crafts, my history in the Spokane arts community, and what brought you back to jewelry making after all these years? Margaret asked, her recorder capturing every word. I considered my answer carefully. "Life has seasons," I said, echoing my words to Lila. "I've been in a season of giving to family. Now I'm in a season of rediscovery. Your family must be thrilled to see you creating again." An image flashed in my mind, Kayla's face at the gala. That mixture of surprise and something like respect when Catherine acknowledged my past contributions. "They're learning who I am," I said simply. "Beyond just grandma." After the interview, I walked Margaret and her photographer to their car. As they pulled away, I noticed Tyler's sedan coming up the driveway. He parked and approached, looking puzzled. "Was that Spokane Arts Quarterly?" "Yes, they're doing a feature on local artisans." He looked at me with new eyes, the same expression he'd worn at the gala. "You're really doing this?" "Reopening your business. A small version of it," I clarified. "Just a studio, not a full retail operation." That's great, Mom." His smile seemed genuine, if uncertain. "Dad would be proud." The mention of Michael caught me off guard. Tyler rarely spoke of his father anymore, a silence I'd attributed to grief, but had come to suspect was more about fitting into Kayla's narrative of their life. "He always was my biggest supporter," I said softly. Tyler shuffled his feet, looking more like the boy I'd raised than the polished attorney he'd become. "I should have been. A supporter, I mean. You had your own life to build." "That's no excuse." He ran a hand through his hair. Another gesture from his youth. "Look, I came by because, well, Kayla wants to talk to you." My guard immediately went up. "About what?" She wouldn't say exactly. "Just that it's important." He hesitated. "She's been different since the gala. Quieter. She went online and found some article about your old boutique. About how you were one of the first female-owned businesses in the downtown revival. This was unexpected. And I think she's realizing there's more to you than she understood." He looked at me directly. "More than I've understood, too, if I'm being honest." I considered this. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the protective distance I'd established. But another part, the part that had raised this man, that still believed in growth and grace, was curious. "When does she want to talk?" "Tomorrow afternoon?" She suggested meeting at Riverfront Park by the carousel. He smiled slightly. Neutral territory, the park. Where I'd taken Tyler as a child, where he'd later proposed to Kayla on a summer evening much like this one. "All right," I agreed. "Tell her I'll meet her at 3. After Tyler left, I sat on my porch swing, watching twilight settle over the garden. So much had changed in just 1 month. My relationship with my son, my sense of purpose, my very understanding of myself. And now, apparently, Kayla wanted to talk. I wasn't naive enough to expect a full transformation. People like Kayla, people who measured their worth by possessions and perceptions, didn't change overnight. But something had shifted, and I found myself curious to discover what. As darkness fell, I returned to my workbench and picked up the piece I'd been saving for last, a delicate silver necklace with a small princess-cut diamond. Not the grand pendant Kayla had coveted, but a piece with its own quiet elegance. Lila's birthday gift. My fingers worked with renewed confidence, setting the stone in its custom bezel. Whatever tomorrow brought with Kayla, this moment was mine. This creation, this reclaimed skill, this piece of heritage I would pass to my granddaughter, not as an obligation or expectation, but as a choice. Freely made. Riverfront Park hummed with early summer activity, children climbing on play structures, joggers circling the paths, tourists snapping photos of the historic carousel. I arrived 15 minutes early, a habit Michael used to tease me about. The chronically punctual, he'd called me, always with affection. I found a bench with a view of both the carousel and the meeting point Tyler had specified. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders as I watched families pass by, wondering what Kayla could possibly want to discuss that required this neutral setting. At precisely 3 o'clock, I spotted her approaching from the parking area. Even for a casual park meeting, Kayla was impeccably styled in white capri pants and a navy blouse, oversized sunglasses hiding her expression. She carried 2 paper cups, steam rising from their lids. "Diana," she greeted me, extending one of the cups. "I brought you a tea? Earl Grey with lemon, right?" I accepted the cup, surprised she remembered my preference. "Thank you." She sat beside me, removing her sunglasses and hooking them on her blouse. Without them, her face looked different, less polished, more human. There were shadows under her eyes I hadn't noticed before. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "I know things have been strained." I sipped my tea, waiting. Whatever Kayla had come to say, I wouldn't make it easier for her by filling the silence. She stared at the carousel, its painted horses rising and falling in endless circles. After the gala, I did some research. "About you. Your business. I heard you were quite successful." She said this like it was a revelation. "Your pieces were featured in Seattle Magazine. You won design awards." "It was a different time in my life," I acknowledged. "But you gave it all up. For Tyler, for us." Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her cup. "Why?" The question caught me off guard. In all our years of uneasy coexistence, Kayla had never shown interest in my motivations or history. "Tyler needed help after his father died," I said simply. "The house meant everything to you both. It seemed like the right choice at the time. But you were only 56. You could have had another decade or more in your career." I studied her profile, trying to discern where this conversation was leading. "What is this about, Kayla?" She turned to face me directly. "I'm trying to understand you. All these years I've seen you as, I don't know, just Tyler's mother. An obligation. Someone who needed taking care of. And now? Now I find out you were this whole other person, respected, accomplished." She shook her head. "It makes me question everything I thought I knew." A child's laughter rang out from the playground, bright and uninhibited. I watched a young mother push her toddler on a swing, the simple joy of their interaction a stark contrast to the complicated emotions flowing between Kayla and me. "We never really tried to know each other," I observed. "That's on both of us." Kayla nodded slowly. "I was intimidated by you. This was so unexpected I nearly spilled my tea." "Intimidated by me? You raised Tyler alone after Michael died. You built a business from nothing. You never seemed to need anyone." She looked down at her hands. "I come from nothing, Diana. My parents had nothing. Every step up I've taken has been a fight, a calculation. I married Tyler not just because I loved him, but because he represented stability, respect." Her honesty was disarming. In all our years under the same roof, we'd never had a conversation this real, and I threatened that somehow. "You were a reminder of what I wasn't. Connected, established, born into security." Her voice took on a bitter edge. "When I heard people at the gala talking about you, about Diana Brooks, the jewelry designer, the community leader, it was like discovering a stranger had been living in our guest house all these years. I thought about this. How we create narratives about others to fit our own needs. How I'd reduced Kayla to a social climber while she'd reduced me to an aging burden. So what happens now?" I asked. She straightened her shoulders, composure returning. "I've asked Tyler to draft papers transferring full ownership of the house to you. This was the last thing I'd expected." "Kayla, please let me finish. You funded half the purchase. You've maintained it for 12 years without recognition. It's legally and morally yours. And where would you and Tyler live? We've been looking at properties in Kendall Yards, smaller but walking distance to Tyler's firm." She attempted a smile. "It's time we stood on our own feet, don't you think?" I sat back, processing this dramatic reversal. "This isn't what I wanted, Kayla. I never intended to force you out of your home. It was never really ours, though, was it?" "Not fully." She looked at me directly. And it's not about the house, not really. It's about recalibration, seeing things as they are, not as I wanted them to be. We sat in silence for a moment, the carousel music providing a wistful soundtrack to our conversation. And the children? I finally asked. Nothing changes there. They adore you, she hesitated. In fact, I was hoping, well, Lila's been talking nonstop about your jewelry making. She said you've been teaching her some basic techniques. She has a good eye. Patient hands. Would you consider continuing that? Perhaps more formally? Kayla seemed genuinely interested. She needs influences beyond just me. Women who've built something of their own. The request, so different from the dismissive Kayla of a month ago, left me momentarily speechless. I'd be happy to, I finally managed. She nodded, relief evident in her expression. And the necklace. The diamond pendant. Here it was, the real reason for this meeting. I steeled myself. I behaved terribly about that, she said, surprising me again. It was never mine to claim. I see that now. It belongs to Lila, I said firmly. When she's 18. As it should be. Kayla gathered her composure. Family legacy matters. I understand that better now. A breeze stirred the leaves overhead, casting dappled shadows across the bench between us. In that moment, I saw Kayla clearly not as the polished, grasping woman who'd made my life small, but as someone shaped by her own insecurities and aspirations. Not so different from me at her age, perhaps. I have a proposal, I said suddenly. Keep the house, she blinked. What? Keep the house, but let me convert the guest house into a proper studio. With the understanding that it's my space, my business. You'd still want to live that close to us? After everything? I considered this. Families are complicated, Kayla. They hurt each other. They misunderstand each other. But they can also heal if everyone's willing to try. And you think we can? Heal? I think it's worth attempting. For Tyler. For the children. I met her gaze steadily. For ourselves. She studied me for a long moment. The calculating look I knew so well gradually replaced by something more thoughtful. You're not what I expected. Diana Brooks. Neither are you, Kayla Monroe. We watched the carousel make another revolution, its gilded poles catching the afternoon light. Not friends, not yet, perhaps not ever, but no longer adversaries. There's one more thing, Kayla said hesitantly. The Spokane Arts Quarterly called me yesterday. They want to do a sidebar about the next generation of jewelers, featuring Lila learning from you. A grandmother-granddaughter connection. And how do you feel about that? She smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one she wore like armor. I think I'd be proud to see my daughter learning from someone like you. As we stood to leave, our empty cups in hand, I realized something fundamental had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, exactly. That would take time and more conversations like this one. But understanding, perhaps. A glimpse of the women behind the roles we'd assigned each other. Same time next week? Kayla suggested, replacing her sunglasses. I'd like to hear more about your plans for the studio. I nodded. I'd like that. As I watched her walk away, posture perfect as always, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this bench. The confrontation at the dinner table. The letter that changed everything. The gala that revealed what had been hidden. And I realized that sometimes, reclaiming your dignity doesn't mean walking away. Sometimes, it means creating space for everyone to stand taller. Autumn painted Spokane in amber and crimson, a season of transition that mirrored the changes in my life. Legacy by Diana. My new studio had opened in August, a transformation of the guest house that exceeded even my optimistic expectations. The conversion had been Tyler's project, his way of making amends. He'd worked weekends alongside the contractors, installing custom lighting, building display cases, creating a space that honored both my past and future. When he presented me with the brass plaque for the door, Legacy by Diana, as 1983 renewed 2025, I'd cried openly, something the old Diana rarely allowed herself. October brought crisp mornings and the first real test of my renewed relationships. Lila's 11th birthday. Traditionally, Kayla orchestrated elaborate parties with themes and coordinated decorations. This year, however, Lila had requested something different. A small celebration at my studio, where she could invite 5 friends to make simple silver bracelets under my guidance. Are you sure you're okay with this? I asked Kayla as we finalized plans over coffee, a weekly ritual we'd established since our park bench conversation. It's what she wants, Kayla replied with a shrug that didn't quite hide her discomfort. And it's a unique experience the other mothers can't duplicate, which counts for something. I smiled at her honesty. 3 months of cautious rebuilding hadn't erased Kayla's social consciousness, but it had softened her edges. We'd discovered an unexpected rhythm, not friendship exactly, but a functional respect that made family gatherings less strained. The day of Lila's party arrived with perfect autumn weather. My studio gleamed with preparation workstations arranged with beginner tools, silver blanks ready for stamping, bowls of polished stones for embellishment. I'd even created small jewelry boxes for each finished piece, lined with velvet and stamped with the recipient's initials. Kayla arrived early, arms full of cupcakes and decorations. I know you said you had it covered, but I couldn't help myself, she admitted, arranging miniature pumpkins along the windowsill. I recognized the gesture for what it was, not interference, but collaboration. They're perfect, I assured her. Thank you. When Lila and her friends arrived, their excitement filled the studio with chatter and laughter. I guided them through basic techniques, showing them how to texture metal, add simple designs, attach clasps. Watching their concentration tongues caught between teeth, eyes narrowed in focus, reminded me of teaching Tyler to ride a bike decades ago. That same determination, that pride in creation, Kayla moved among them, taking photos, offering encouragement. At one point, our eyes met across the room, and she gave me a small nod of acknowledgement. We were creating something here beyond jewelry, a memory Lila would carry forward, a foundation for her own journey. After the guests departed with their treasures, Lila lingered in the studio while Kayla and Tyler cleaned up. She approached my workbench where a small wrapped package waited. Is that for me, Grandma? It is. I handed her the box, wrapped in silver paper with a blue ribbon. Happy birthday, sweetheart. She opened it carefully, gasping when she saw the contents, the delicate silver necklace with its princess-cut diamond that I'd been working on for months. It's beautiful, she whispered, lifting it from the box. It's what we call a coming-of-age piece, I explained. Not as grand as the pendant you'll receive when you're 18, but something to mark the beginning of your journey to womanhood. Can I put it on? Of course. As I fastened the clasp around her neck, Kayla appeared in the doorway. She watched silently, her expression unreadable. Mom. Look what Grandma made me, Lila called, turning to display the necklace. Kayla approached slowly, examining the piece with an expert's eye, a skill she'd developed in our months of cautious rapprochement. It's exquisite, Diana. The setting is so delicate. Thank you. I hesitated, then added, I hoped you might help me select a stone for a similar piece for Caleb's 10th birthday next year. Something more masculine, of course. The surprise in her eyes was worth the momentary vulnerability. I'd be honored. That evening, after the birthday celebration wound down, I sat alone in my studio, savoring the quiet and the day's success. A knock at the door interrupted my reflection. Come in, I called, expecting Tyler or one of the children. Instead, Harold Klein entered, a bottle of champagne in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. I heard there was a celebration today, he said, setting the glasses on my workbench. Thought you might enjoy a toast to your first successful studio event. In the months since the gala, Harold had become a regular presence in my new life, attending my studio opening, recommending clients, occasionally escorting me to community events. Not quite courting, but something more than friendship. You didn't have to come all the way over, I said, though I was pleased to see him. Didn't have to. Wanted to. He poured champagne into both glasses. 2 successful beginnings. And honest endings, I added, clinking my glass against his. He settled into the chair opposite mine, loosening his tie. How was it? Having both generations of Monroe women in your space? Surprisingly harmonious. I sipped the champagne, letting its effervescence match my lightened spirit. Kayla's trying. We both are. Remarkable woman, that daughter-in-law of yours, Harold observed. Tough as nails, but adaptable when pushed to it. We're more alike than either of us realized, I admitted. Both protective of what we've built. Both worried about losing our place. Harold studied me over his glass. And have you found your place now, Diana? The question resonated beyond my studio, beyond my reconciliation with Kayla. It touched something deeper, my sense of self, so long subordinated to others' needs. I'm getting there, I answered honestly. One day at a time. Outside, leaves skittered across the garden path. Inside, the studio held the day's creative energy, Lila's laughter, her friend's pride, my own renewed purpose. I have something to show you, I said suddenly, setting down my glass. From a drawer beneath my workbench, I withdrew a leather portfolio. The magazine feature came out yesterday. Harold accepted the magazine, opening to the bookmarked page. There I was, photographed at my workbench, tools in hand. The headline read, "Legacy Reborn, Diana Brooks returns to Spokane's artisan scene." They did you justice, Harold said. Studying the photos. Keep reading. He turned the page to find the promised sidebar, Next Generation, a family tradition continues. The photo showed Lila beside me, both of us bent over a piece in progress, my hands guiding hers. Tyler nearly cried when he saw it, I said softly. Said his father would have been so proud to see the legacy continuing. Harold's eyes met mine. Michael would be proud of more than that. He'd be proud of the woman you've become, the dignity with which you've handled everything. Even when I almost evicted my son and his wife? I asked with a rueful smile. Especially then. Harold reached across the workbench to take my hand. Standing up for yourself isn't diminished by later choosing compassion. As darkness gathered outside, we talked of small things and large ones, studio plans, community events, memories of Michael, possibilities for the future. Not once did I feel like someone's mother or grandmother or former anything. I was simply Diana, present and whole. When Harold finally rose to leave, he paused at the door. There's a chamber music concert at the museum next Friday. Would you consider accompanying me? As your friend? I asked, thinking of our comfortable companionship these past months. He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. As my date, Diana, it's time we called this what it is, don't you think? After he left, I stood in the doorway of my studio, watching the lights of the main house where my family lived. Through the kitchen window, I could see Tyler helping Caleb with homework, while Kayla prepared lunchboxes for the next day. Ordinary moments in an imperfect but healing family. I touched the studio plaque. Legacy by Diana, and realized that the true legacy wasn't jewelry or property or even family name. It was the courage to begin again, no matter your age, to reclaim what was always yours, your dignity, your voice, your right to stand in your own light. December arrived with gentle snow and the warm glow of holiday preparations. My studio had exceeded expectations, with commissions booked through spring and weekly classes filled to capacity. More importantly, the delicate balance we'd established as a family had held through autumn's transitions. The main house glittered with Kayla's meticulous decorations, a showcase worthy of her popular Instagram account. My studio featured simpler adornments, pine boughs, cinnamon sticks, and the hand-carved wooden ornaments Michael and I had collected throughout our marriage. Sunday dinners had resumed by mutual agreement, though with subtle differences. Now I arrived as a guest, not kitchen help. Contributions were acknowledged, opinions sought. Small shifts that signified larger healing. Today, however, was special. The 1-year anniversary of that fateful dinner when Kayla had announced her intention to claim my diamond necklace. We hadn't planned to commemorate the date, but awareness of it hummed beneath our interactions as we gathered around the table. Before we begin, Tyler said, raising his glass, I'd like to propose a toast. To family, to growth, to second chances. We clinked glasses, the children included with their sparkling cider. Lila's silver necklace caught the light as she lifted her glass, a constant reminder of our journey. And to Grandma's studio, Caleb added enthusiastically. Did you know she's teaching me too? I made a keychain all by myself. Soon you'll be more skilled than I am, I teased, ruffling his hair. Not possible, Kayla said, the compliment flowing naturally. Diana's work is becoming quite collectible again. Mrs. Abernathy was showing off her custom bracelet at the charity board meeting last week. Speaking of the charity board, Tyler interjected, they've asked Mom to join next year, to head up the artisan auction again. That's wonderful news, Harold said beside me, his hand finding mine beneath the table. In the 4 months since our first official date, he'd become a regular presence at family gatherings bringing legal wisdom, dry humor, and steadfast support. Dinner proceeded with easy conversation, punctuated by Caleb's school stories and Lila's detailed report on her latest jewelry project. As dessert was served, a pumpkin cheesecake I'd contributed, Kayla disappeared briefly, returning with a small wrapped package. "This seems like an appropriate occasion," she said, placing it beside my plate. "From all of us." The table fell silent as I unwrapped the gift, a velvet jewelry box, emerald green and vintage in style. Inside lay a brooch I recognized immediately, the Art Deco piece I'd given Kayla for her birthday last year, the one she'd dismissed as quaint, but it had been transformed. The original setting remained, but the stones had been upgraded, the metalwork enhanced with delicate filigree. "I had it reworked," Kayla explained, watching my reaction, "by that artisan jeweler you recommended in Seattle. I kept the original design, it was perfect, but added stones that matched your birthstone." "It's beautiful," I said honestly, touched by the thoughtfulness behind the gesture. "But why?" Kayla exchanged glances with Tyler before answering. "To acknowledge my first impression was wrong. To show I've learned to see value in things I once overlooked." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Harold squeezed my hand gently. "There's something else," Tyler added, producing an envelope from his pocket. The final paperwork from Harold's office. "The trust for Lila is fully established, with the diamond pendant as its cornerstone. But we've added to it." I accepted the envelope, scanning the document inside. The trust now included seed money for Lila's education, with specific provisions for artistic pursuits. And there, on the final page, an unexpected addition, my name listed as co-trustee alongside Tyler and Kayla. "We want you to help guide her," Tyler explained. "In all the ways we should have let you guide us." Emotions tightened my throat. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept," Kayla urged. "Say you'll help us do better." "Of course I will." I looked around the table at these people who had hurt me, whom I had hurt in return, and with whom I was now building something stronger than before. "We'll do better together." After dinner, the children disappeared to the family room while the adults lingered over coffee. Harold and Tyler discussed legal matters, their voices a comfortable backdrop as Kayla helped me clear the table. "I never properly apologized," she said quietly as we loaded the dishwasher, "for how I treated you all those years." "You've shown your apology through actions," I replied. "That means more than words." She paused, hands full of silverware. I was so focused on appearances, on what others thought. I didn't see what was right in front of me, a woman who had achieved everything I aspired to. "We see each other clearly now," I offered. "That's what matters." Later, as Harold and I walked the snowy path to my studio, stars glittering overhead, I reflected on the year's journey. From invisible grandmother to respected artisan. From silent sacrifice to spoken truth. From isolation to connection. "Penny for your thoughts?" Harold asked, his breath clouding in the frosty air. "I was thinking about dignity," I replied. "How we surrender it in small increments, often without noticing. And how reclaiming it changes everything." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Diana, when Michael and I discussed his will all those years ago, he made me promise something." "What was that?" "That I'd look after you. Not financially, he knew you were more than capable there. But emotionally. That I'd make sure you didn't lose yourself in grief or family obligations." I stopped on the path, turning to face him. "You never told me that." "I failed at it for a long time," he admitted. "Watched from a distance as you gave everything to Tyler and his family. But when you called me last year, something in your voice had changed. You were ready to reclaim yourself. And you were waiting. Patiently." His smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Some treasures are worth waiting for." Inside my studio, the answering machine blinked with new messages, commissions, class inquiries, an invitation to showcase at a Seattle gallery. My workbench held projects in various stages of completion, including the pendant I was designing for Kayla's upcoming birthday, a peace offering of my own. As Harold built a fire in the small wood stove, I moved to the window, looking back at the main house. Through the lighted windows, I could see my family continuing their evening, Tyler helping Lila with homework, Caleb demonstrating a karate move, Kayla arranging fresh flowers in a vase. Not perfect. Not without complications. But real and evolving. "Any regrets?" Harold asked, joining me at the window. "About standing up for myself?" "Never." I leaned against his shoulder. "About how I did it?" "Maybe a few. But we've all learned from it." That's the thing about dignity, Diana. Once you reclaim it, you see it more clearly in others. The studio phone rang, interrupting our reflection. The caller ID showed Eleanor Thompson a new commission, most likely. Aren't you going to answer? Harold asked when I made no move toward the phone. I smiled, turning away from both the phone and the window. Tomorrow. Business can wait. And what can't wait? He asked, eyes warming with understanding. Living, I answered simply. Right here. Right now. 1 year ago, I'd stood frozen as Kayla claimed something that was never hers to take. I'd smiled a small, closed-lipped smile, knowing justice would come in its own time. Now I smiled for a different reason, not because of what I'd protected or proven, but because of what I'd built. A business renewed. Relationships reconstructed. A life reclaimed, not through vengeance or bitter triumph, but through the quiet, powerful dignity of a woman who finally understood her own worth. As the snow fell gently outside and the fire warmed my studio, I realized the most precious legacy wasn't diamonds or property, or even family name. It was the courage to stand in your truth, to forgive without forgetting, to rebuild what was broken, and to recognize that it's never too late to become the person you were always meant to be.